Hello. When it comes to Reddit, I'm usually just a watcher, never posting much, but checking in pretty often. However, I've been encouraged to share my story by many friends who I've told it to in person. My encounter 3 years ago is still one I have trouble thinking or looking back on. Anyways, a little background about me and my roommate in the story. We were both practicing Christians, so I do believe in the spiritual side, demons and such. But I had never had any encounters I deemed supernatural per se. That all changed for me 3 years ago. We were living in a small apartment at the time, where me and my roommate, let's call him Joe for now on, lived at the time. His girlfriend had just gotten back from a mission trip to Haiti and brought home a gift for him. This gift, a crudely wooden carved elephant that she was gifted from a child from the village. This thing was freaking creepy. It just gave off an eerie vibe by looking at it. Clearly hand-carved with not the best craftsmanship, it was unsettling to look at. However, Joe, being a good boyfriend, graciously accepted the gift. I somewhat jokingly, but also seriously, expressed how I did not like the mojo surrounding this thing. He basically explained he thought it was weird, but it was a gift, so he was going to keep it. And at that, keep it in our room. Later that night, I received an unusual text from my neighbor who lived across the hall. We were friends, but never really texted, so this struck me as odd when she asked, "Are you okay?" I was in the living room watching a movie at time, so I replied, "Yeah, just relaxing watching TV." Met with a response of, "Oh, just pulled in and thought I saw you in your room pacing back and forth." My heart dropped. I was home alone at the time. And I immediately ran into the room to find nothing but stillness. I made a glance at the wood-carved monstrosity, which almost felt as if it was staring back, then closed the door. Now unsettled, but not completely startled. A couple hours later, it was time for bed. By this time, my roommate had already returned. I told him about the text, but he mainly brushed it off. I never have been a great sleeper, so this experience didn't help me get into a state of rest. However, eventually my mind drifted asleep. This sleep did not last long. A feeling I had never felt before came over me. My eyes felt as if they were glued open, and I didn't even notice myself blinking. My body was strapped to the bed, not able to move any appendage. All I had control over were my eyes. I immediately looked to my roommate across the room, who was dead asleep with all my might, trying to let out anything from my mouth. But not even a whimper. My eyes then looked to the foot of my bed to see a sight that gripped me with curling fear. An imposing outline of nothing but black. So black, it stood out among the rest of the darkness. There was not face, no true shape, just the vague structure of a humanoid creature that looked as if it was a void absorbing darkness and growing even blacker by the second. I moved my eyes up to try and avoid to the thing, but it was so tall it was hard to see it. Then it felt as if my chest was crushing. Looking down to the pressure on my chest, it now appeared the thing was coming over me. It wasn't crawling over my bed, more as if just levitating, closer and closer, and closer and closer, until I was forced to stare at nothing but the void before me, what I presumed to be this creature's face. There was no emotion, no noise, no nothing, just darkness. And when I think back to this, that's what churns my stomach. The lack of anything is something I had ever experienced. I don't remember the thing leaving or me falling asleep. I just woke up in the morning. Naturally, thinking my mind had just dreamt up a terrible nightmare, I was still shaken. However, when I looked to the floor of the room and saw that wood-carved creature had fallen off its shelf and rolled a solid 3 feet to the foot of my bed, I felt ill from the fear. I immediately decided the events were connected. I have never suffered from sleep paralysis before or after this event. We got rid of the wooden elephant, then blessed each room of the house and had no issues until we moved out. I truly believe this wood-carved object had something attached to it. I'm not very informed on the subject, but it was of Haitian descent, so my first thought was voodoo. This is my only ever encounter of this type, so please let me know if you'll have any other more informed opinions or similar stories. Thanks for listening to my story. Sorry if my writing was sloppy. I've never made a post close to this long before. This might sound very cliché, but about 10 years or so ago, my family and I brought back these small vases, who we were told were over 400 years old from Machu Picchu. The vases were made from mud and had a face carved on them. We were given them by a family friend who said he wanted to give us something special for visiting Peru. He claimed he bought them from a local in Pisco region of Peru, where Machu Picchu is. We brought it back home to Canada, and pretty much from week one, a horrible streak of bad luck and accidents began to happen to our family. My mom came down with cataract at a very young age. My father lost both his jobs. My brother and I were both constantly sick, and my little sister would start screaming randomly. Pretty much on the verge of being homeless, we were looking for things to sell and came across these things. We didn't know if we could even sell them and for how much. To get an idea on their value, we called one of my dad's friend in Peru who had worked in a museum in Peru. After a bit of back and forth, he told my dad that these type of items are not meant to leave its home soil and are not worth more than a few bucks. He said that these items are probably cursed. He said to lift the curse, we prick our fingers and smear a little bit of blood on each one and send them back. Now, we of course were very skeptical and thought that they were probably worth something. We assumed the guy wanted them so he can sell them. I mean, a blood sacrifice? That's ridiculous. Fast forward 2 days, my mother and father get into a pretty nasty car accident. They were okay, but they both needed to be off work for a few weeks. After that, they both decided that maybe we should send them back and do the blood thing. We sent them back the next week, and after that, things got noticeably better. My father found a very good job, as did my mom. We found a really good place to live with a very low rent and overall better health. My grandma bought a porcelain carriage about 5 inches high, painted, had the horses and footmen and driver all attached, really pretty knick-knack. She bought it from a church yard sale, and the lady nun who sold it to her told her it had been blessed. My grandma gives the carriage to my mom, who puts it on the shelf above our television, think 90s TV with a huge entertainment center and a shelf above it. The shelf itself had been up forever and usually housed heavy glass objects. It was also mounted to the wall with screws, not nails. This is important later. About a week after my mom put the thing up, I was in the kitchen doing dishes, my mother was laying on the couch watching TV, and my dad was outside working on his boat. My dad had brought home a glass bottle of tequila, which was sitting on top of the refrigerator. All at once, 3 things happen. The bottle of tequila falls and smashes on the counter. The shelf gives way and breaks, wedging the porcelain carriage between the entertainment center and the wall, and the TV turns off. There was no shaking that could have caused the falling bottle or shelf. My dad, having heard the smashing bottle, comes inside and attempts to retrieve the carriage from between TV and wall, assuming that the carriage knocked the plug loose when it fell. He reaches down to retrieve the carriage and it falls to the floor, smashing into a few pieces. The TV is still plugged in, it had never come loose. After this, I asked my mom who was laughing. I clearly heard someone laugh. It still sends chills down my spine thinking about it. My mom looked at me and said nobody laughed. My parents cleaned up the mess, dumped the porcelain and glass in the trash, and unplugged and replugged the TV. After that, I had nightmares for months. My sister was in Delphi, Greece on a study abroad trip and purchased 3 owl figurines. When making the purchase, the shop owner told her to buy either 2 or 4 owls, but not 3. My sister insisted she only needed 3. After some back and forth, my sister completed the purchase of 3 owls, and the shop owner told her that she was placing a hex on one of the owls because she bought 3. My sister brushed it off. Once she was back home, my sister presented me with 3 owl figurines and told me to choose one for myself. I didn't know the hex story at the time. I chose the owl I liked the most and took it home, happy to have a souvenir from Greece. Over the next few months, things got really strange. I started having night terrors and sleep paralysis. I had an overwhelming feeling of dread. I thought I was losing my mind. My cat Minerva, named after the Roman goddess of wisdom and war, associated with Greek goddess Athena, sacred animal is the owl, began knocking the owl figurine into the floor every day. I assumed she was just being a cat and doing cat things. At this point, I still don't know about the supposed hex. One night, around 1 a.m., I believe, I got a text from my sister saying there was a beautiful white owl in the tree outside her window. I was awake due to my insomnia caused by fear of sleeping, did not want more night terrors or sleep paralysis, and immediately called my sister. She wasn't too surprised that I was awake at that hour. She was excited to tell me about the owl, but I stopped her. I was crying, and I said, I know what this means. Minerva is going to die. I don't know how or why, but something told me that Minerva knocking the owl over and the owl visiting my sister meant that Minerva was going to die. I explained this to my sister, and she started crying and told me about the hex the old shop owner claimed to place on one of the owls. I freaked out. I put the owl figurine in a glass of sea salt. Within a few months, my sweet Minerva cat passed away due to unexplained kidney failure at the young age of 3 years. I fell into a deep depression. That was 8 years ago. I recovered from that depression, but will never forget that experience and how it changed my life. I don't understand why the shop owner put a hex on that owl, but I truly believe it was real. I had a cursed object. My girlfriend got it as a gift or something. She can't quite remember exactly where it came from, but it's a wooden statue of Mary praying. When we first opened the moving box it was in, I put it out on a counter since it just fit aesthetically. Oddly enough, I didn't correlate that it was the cause yet, but some odd shit happened in that apartment. It was a really shady apartment to start, and I don't mean paranormal. We had people having fights outside often, people sleeping in the hallways, people pissing in the washer dryers, people smoking what I can safely assume was heroin or meth on tin foil outside on the stairs. We barely got sleep enough as it was, but after we unpacked that box, there were random bumps and doors slamming inside the apartment. The TV and my computer would randomly turn on. The router would come unplugged. Things wouldn't be where we left them. A couple times I wouldn't be able to sleep and I'd be on the couch around 3 a.m. and I would feel something touch me. A very cold sensation like an ice cube was near my skin. Our cats would hide in the bedroom under the covers for hours on end, then meow and scratch at the door. When we opened it, their hair would stand straight up, and they would hiss at nothing. One time, the male cat we have, Corvo, completely pissed himself and hid under our dresser all day. Anyways, I didn't really believe in spirits before this, or if I did, it was loosely. But after having shit thrown at your head when you are home alone, you start believing quick. I read somewhere that wearing a cross would help, so I searched around for one. Finally, in the same box was a little bag of jewelry with the outline of a cross made in metal inside it. I picked it up and put it over my neck. That's when shit got really weird. You know the white static noise you hear when there's absolute silence that kind of sounds like whispering? Sometimes at night we could hear that, but it was never silent in that neighborhood at all. The neighbor was always yelling and cursing because he was an angry alcoholic, I guess. Breaking shit too. The neighbors downstairs were always throwing shit and fighting. One even threw their McDonald's milkshake at our window the first month we were there, and the landlord never cleaned it off. To this day, it's still there, last I saw about a month ago. Then came the horrible, very realistic nightmares. My GF is scared of bugs, and she dreamed that she was smaller than the bugs. Me? I dreamt about people coming in to rob us and kill us. The dream always ended with me dying or my GF dead. Sometimes we dreamt that there was this twisted old lady standing next to the bed. Even dreamt about my loved ones dying. Had a dream where my brother was assassinated. Anywho, long story short, the statue started being in different places and pointing different ways when we would re-enter the living room. We would both leave together to go do errands and come back to the statue in the bathroom staring at us. After a while of this, and trying to cleanse the house with sage and salt, my girlfriend suggested we burned it. From what I read, that was a terrible idea, so we brainstormed. After a bit, we remembered the necklace and the statue were in the same box, and she suggested that maybe we should put the necklace around it since it wasn't doing this before. So we did, and everything stopped immediately. For those who did read this whole damn thing, I'll let you know we still have that statue to this day. When we tried to put it away in a box again, it would suddenly appear out of it, usually right next to the box, so we gave up and just left it out. When we moved out of that shithole, we brought it with us. It doesn't do any harm now, and I feel like if we ever got rid of it, it would somehow come back.